Sarah Chen folded her last uniform and placed it carefully in the metal case. The fabric still smelled like the recycled air of the council station. She had worn it for 12 years, representing Earth in the grand chambers where 100 different species made decisions for the galaxy. Now she would never wear it again. Her office looked strange and empty. The walls that once held pictures of Earth's blue oceans and green forests were bare. The small plant her daughter had given her was already packed away. Sarah had spent more time in this room than in her own home. She had missed birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays to sit in endless meetings where other species argued about trade routes and territory disputes. The door chimed softly. Ambassador Torres walked in, carrying his own packed bags. His dark eyes were tired but calm. He had been Sarah's partner in this job for 8 years. Together they had solved conflicts, negotiated peace treaties, and helped build the trade networks that fed billions of people across the galaxy. "The transport is ready," Torres said quietly. "The others are already aboard." Sarah nodded and picked up her case. They walked through the corridors of the council station for the last time. The walls were made of crystal that glowed with soft light. Alien scripts from dozens of worlds decorated the surfaces. Sarah had learned to read most of them during her time here. It had seemed important to understand what everyone was saying. They passed other diplomats in the hallways. The tall, thin Zephyrians floated past without acknowledging them. Their energy bodies flickered blue and gold, but they kept their faces turned away. A group of Korgan warriors stomped by in their heavy armor. The bird-like creatures didn't even glance at the humans. Sarah had worked with all of these beings. She had helped solve their problems and listened to their concerns. Now they acted like she didn't exist. The transport bay was busy with activity. Ships from different worlds were loading and unloading cargo. The air smelled of ozone and fuel. Sarah and Torres found their shuttle near the back of the bay. It was a simple human design, built for long journeys and basic comfort. Nothing fancy, like the crystal ships of the Vorthak or the living vessels that the plant people grew. Captain Rodriguez was waiting by the shuttle's door. His weathered face showed no emotion, but Sarah could see the anger in his eyes. He had been flying diplomats to and from the council station for 15 years. This was his last trip. "Ma'am," he said with a slight nod. "We're cleared for departure. No delays, no inspection. They want us gone fast." Sarah looked back at the station one more time. The massive structure stretched for kilometers in all directions. Millions of beings lived and worked there. It was supposed to be the center of galactic civilization, where all species came together in peace and cooperation. She had believed in that dream once. "Let's go home," she said. The shuttle was full of quiet humans. Sarah recognized most of them. There was Dr. Martinez, who had spent 20 years studying alien diseases and finding cures. Engineer Kim sat near the back, still wearing his work clothes. He had been fixing the station's life support systems when the vote happened. Ambassador Wright looked out the window with sad eyes. She had been negotiating a peace treaty between two warring species just yesterday. Nobody talked as the shuttle left the station. The pilot's voice came over the speakers, giving them the standard departure information. Course set for Earth. Travel time 43 days. Sarah closed her eyes and tried not to think about the meeting that had changed everything. It had happened 3 days ago. The council chambers were full, as they always were for important votes. Sarah had taken her usual seat in the human section. She thought they were going to discuss the new trade regulations. Instead, Chairman Veltar had stood up and announced that humanity's membership in the Galactic Council was under review. The charges were serious, too violent, too unpredictable, too quick to interfere in other species' affairs. Sarah had listened, in shock as speaker after speaker agreed with the chairman. The Korgan representative said humans were too aggressive. The peaceful Delari claimed humans disrupted their quiet way of life. Even the Zephyrians, who had worked closely with human scientists, voted against them. Sarah had asked to speak in humanity's defense. She had prepared a long speech about all the good things humans had done for the galaxy, the medical research that had saved millions of lives, the engineering projects that connected distant worlds, the peacekeeping missions that had stopped wars before they started. But the chairman had cut her off after just 2 minutes. "The decision has been made," Veltar had said in his cold, crystal voice. "Humanity is expelled from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. You have 72 hours to remove all human personnel from Council territory." That had been it. No discussion, no appeal, no chance to explain their side. After decades of membership, humanity was thrown out like unwanted garbage. Sarah had sat in stunned silence as the other representatives moved on to the next item on their agenda. A debate about shipping schedules. As if nothing important had just happened. The shuttle jumped to hyperspace with a barely noticeable shudder. Through the windows, Sarah could see the strange colors and patterns of faster-than-light travel. In a few weeks, they would see the yellow sun of Earth again. But what then? How could she explain to the people back home that their representatives had failed? That the galaxy they had worked so hard to join no longer wanted them? She thought about all the humans still scattered across the galaxy. The doctors working in alien hospitals. The engineers maintaining power stations on distant worlds. The traders carrying goods between species that couldn't stand each other. The researchers studying problems that affected everyone. What would happen to them? Would they be forced to leave their jobs and their lives behind? Ambassador Torres sat down next to her. His face was grim. "I just got a message from the communication center," he said quietly. "They're shutting down our access to the galactic network. Emergency codes, diplomatic channels, everything. As of midnight station time, we're cut off." Sarah felt a cold chill in her stomach. The communication network connected every world in the galaxy. Without it, they couldn't talk to human colonies, coordinate supply runs, or call for help in emergencies. They were being isolated completely. "Did you send the recall message?" she asked. Torres nodded. "Every human facility, every outpost, every research station. The order is clear. Pack up and come home. Leave nothing behind." Sarah looked around, the shuttle at her fellow diplomats. These were good people who had spent their lives serving not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. They had made sacrifices, worked long hours, and solved countless problems. And now they were being cast out, like criminals. She wondered if the council understood what they were doing. Did they know that humans ran the maintenance systems for half the stations in the Outer Rim? Did they realize that human doctors were the only ones who understood how to treat certain diseases? Did they care that human engineers had designed most of the safety systems that kept everyone alive? Probably not. The other species saw humans as troublemakers and nothing more. They didn't notice all the quiet work that happened behind the scenes. They only paid attention when something went wrong and they needed someone to blame. The shuttle hummed quietly through space, carrying its cargo of rejected diplomats toward home. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight she just wanted to forget about the galaxy that no longer wanted humanity to be part of it. Outside the windows, the stars looked different in hyperspace, twisted and strange, like everything else had become. Captain Zekai of the merchant vessel Star Trader felt the first stab of worry when his ship's navigation system showed red warnings across the display. He was halfway between the Korgan homeworld and the mining stations in the Outer Rim. This route was supposed to be safe and well-traveled. Ships made this journey every day, but something was wrong. "Navigation officer," he called to his second-in-command. "Why are we getting failure signals from Waypoint Station 7? The young Korgan at the navigation station tapped his clawed fingers rapidly across the controls. His warrior training had not prepared him for this kind of technical problem. "Sir, the station is not responding to our signals. The automated systems show it as offline." Zekai felt his stomach tighten. Waypoint stations were small outposts scattered along the major trade routes. They provided fuel, repairs, and navigation, updates to passing ships. Without them, long journeys became dangerous. Ships could get lost, run out of fuel, or break down with no help available. "Try Waypoint Station 9, he ordered. More bad news. Station 9 was also offline. So was Station 12. In fact, every waypoint station along their route was showing the same status. No response, no services, no help. "Sir," the navigation officer said quietly. We don't have enough fuel to reach our destination without refueling. HFY stared at the star charts on his screen. The outer rim routes were designed around the waypoint stations. Ships carried just enough fuel to get from one station to the next. It was efficient and cost-effective. It had worked perfectly for 20 years. But now, with the stations offline, ships were trapped between destinations like islands in a vast ocean. He was not the only captain facing this problem. Emergency calls were flooding the communication networks. Dozens of ships were stranded or running low on fuel. Some were carrying medical supplies to colonies that desperately needed them. Others had passengers aboard, including children and elderly beings who could not survive long delays. On the crystal world of Vorth Prime, Engineer Talvin was dealing with a different kind of crisis. The massive power grid that supplied energy to the planet's 12 billion inhabitants was behaving strangely. Fluctuations in power output were causing blackouts in major cities. The elegant crystal towers that housed the Vorthak government were running on backup power. Talvin had been an engineer for 40 years. He understood the power grid better than almost anyone. But the current problems made no sense to him. The main reactors were working fine. The transmission lines were undamaged. Yet somehow the entire system was becoming unstable. He called up the maintenance records on his computer. Most of the recent work had been done by a company called Human Technical Solutions. The name meant nothing to him. He had never paid attention to which species did the routine maintenance work. As long as the power stayed on, the details didn't matter. But now he needed those details. He tried to contact Human Technical Solutions, but their communication codes were no longer active. He checked the personnel records and found something disturbing. All of the human maintenance workers had left their jobs 2 days ago. No explanations. No handover of duties. They had simply packed up and disappeared. Talvin felt a cold fear in his crystal heart. The power grid was incredibly complex. It required constant monitoring and adjustment to keep it stable. The humans had been doing this work quietly, without anyone noticing. Now they were gone, and the system was falling apart. On the gas giant mining platform of Nexus 7, Foreman Korth was watching his production numbers drop hour by hour. The huge machines that extracted valuable gases from the planet's atmosphere were shutting down one by one, not from damage or wear, but from some kind of coordination failure. The mining operation was a miracle of engineering. Hundreds of floating platforms worked together to harvest the rare elements that powered faster-than-light drives. It required precise timing and constant communication between the platforms. Any mistake could cause explosions or collisions. For 15 years, the coordination had been handled by a human company. Korth had never bothered to learn their names or understand their methods. He just knew that they kept the platforms working, smoothly and efficiently. The humans had seemed happy to work in the dangerous environment that most species avoided. Now the platforms were drifting out of position. Communication systems were failing. 3 platforms had already shut down their operations for safety reasons. If the trend continued, the entire mining operation would have to stop. That would cut off the supply of drive fuel for half the galaxy. Korth tried to call the Human Coordination Center, but the facility was empty. Security cameras showed abandoned workstations and darkened control rooms. The humans had left without warning, taking their knowledge and expertise with them. In the council chambers on the Great Station, Chairman Veltar was reviewing the first reports of problems across the galaxy. He read them with growing confusion. Power failures, communication breakdowns, stranded ships, production shutdowns. Each problem seemed unrelated to the others, but they were all happening at the same time. His aide, a nervous Delari named Softwing, fluttered around his desk with more reports. "Sir, we're getting emergency calls from 17 different systems. They're all requesting immediate technical assistance." Veltar's crystalline form glowed with irritation. "What kind of technical assistance? We have experts for all these problems." "That's just it, sir," Softwing said quietly. "Most of our technical experts were human. The companies that maintained the infrastructure, the specialists who handled complex repairs, the coordinators who managed the supply chains. They've all left. The chairman felt something he had never experienced before, a crack of doubt in his crystal certainty. "Surely we have other engineers and technicians." "Yes, sir, but they're specialists in their own species' technology. The humans were generalists. They learned everyone's systems and found ways to make them work together. Without them, many of our networks are failing." Veltar turned to his computer and called up the galactic infrastructure reports. For the first time in his long career, he actually read the detailed maintenance schedules and technical summaries. What he found shocked him. Human companies and workers were everywhere. They ran the communication relays that connected distant worlds. They maintained the life support systems on frontier colonies. They operated the emergency response networks that saved lives during disasters. They coordinated the complex supply chains that fed billions of beings. Most disturbing of all, they had been doing this work quietly and efficiently for decades. No complaints, no demands for recognition, no political maneuvering. They had simply found problems and fixed them, often without being asked. "How did we not know about this?" Veltar asked his aide. Soft Wing's feathers ruffled with embarrassment. "The humans never made a big show of their contributions, sir. They just did the work and submitted their reports. Since everything always functioned properly, no one paid attention to who was making it function." The chairman stared at the reports on his screen. The scope of human involvement in galactic infrastructure was staggering. They weren't just members of the council. They were the invisible foundation that held everything together, and now they were gone. More emergency calls were coming in every hour. A plague outbreak on Rigel 4 that couldn't be contained because the medical supply network had collapsed. A revolution on Kepler Prime that was spreading because the peacekeeping forces couldn't coordinate their response. A massive solar flare that was threatening to destroy several colonies because the early warning system was offline. Each crisis could have been handled easily with human help. The humans had systems in place for all these problems. They had experience, knowledge, and the strange ability to work with any species when lives were at stake. But the humans were no longer available. They had been expelled from the council as troublemakers and interfering busybodies. And now the galaxy was discovering what happened when the troubleshooters disappeared. Veltar sat alone in his office as the reports piled up on his desk. For the first time since becoming chairman, he wondered if the council had made a terrible mistake. The humans had been annoying, yes. They asked difficult questions and interfered in situations where they weren't wanted. But they had also been keeping the galaxy running smoothly. Outside his window, he could see ships arriving at the station with news of new problems. Emergency lights were flashing on communication panels across the galaxy. And somewhere out there, the humans were quietly traveling back to their homeworld, taking their skills and knowledge with them. The cracks were just beginning to show. But Veltar had the feeling that much worse was coming. The first major communication blackout happened at 1432 Galactic Standard Time, 7 days after the humans left the council station. Dr. Zythara was in the middle of performing surgery on a Korgan patient when the medical network went silent. She had been consulting with specialists on 3 different worlds about the complex procedure. One moment she could see their holographic faces giving advice about the delicate work on the patient's spine. The next moment, they were gone. The operating room fell into an eerie quiet except for the sound of life support machines. Dr. Zythara's 4 hands trembled slightly as she realized she was completely alone with a half-finished surgery. The patient's life depended on information from databases she could no longer access. The specialists who had been guiding her through the procedure were unreachable. She had been a doctor for 30 years, but this particular surgery was beyond her experience. The Korgan warrior had been injured in a mining accident, and his spine was damaged in ways that her species had never seen before. Only the combined knowledge of doctors from many different worlds could save him. "Nurse," she called to her assistant, "try to reestablish contact with the surgical network." The nurse, a young being from the plant world of Verdun, shook her leafy head sadly. "I've tried everything, doctor. The network is completely down. I can't reach anyone." Dr. Zythara stared down at her patient. The Korgan's breathing was steady but weak. She could see the damaged nerves in his spine through her surgical viewers. Without guidance from the specialists, any move she made could paralyze him forever, or kill him outright. But if she did nothing, he would die anyway. She had never felt so helpless. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out in hospitals, research centers, and emergency facilities. The Galactic Communication Network had been the miracle that allowed different species to work together despite being scattered across thousands of light years. Doctors could consult with colleagues on distant worlds. Scientists could share data instantly. Emergency responders could coordinate rescue efforts across multiple systems. Now it was all gone. The network failure started small. A few relay stations went offline, causing brief interruptions in service. Then more stations failed as automatic systems tried to compensate for the missing links. The failures spread like a virus through the network, each breakdown causing more stress on the remaining systems. On the desert world of Arid Prime, Communication Officer Dextar watched his screens with growing horror as relay station after relay station went dark. He had worked in the communication center for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like this. The network was designed to be incredibly reliable. Multiple backup systems, redundant pathways, automatic repair, protocols. It should have been impossible for so many failures to happen at once. He called up the maintenance records for the failing stations. The pattern was clear and terrifying. All of the stations had been serviced by human technical teams. The humans had designed the repair protocols, installed the backup systems, and trained the local staff on basic maintenance procedures. But the humans had done more than just follow standard procedures. They had made thousands of small improvements and modifications to keep the aging network running smoothly. They had updated software, replaced worn components, and created custom solutions for problems that the original designers had never imagined. Most importantly, they had been constantly monitoring the network for signs of trouble. Their technical centers operated around the clock, watching for the early warning signs of system failures. When problems started to develop, human engineers would fix them before anyone else even noticed. Now the human monitoring centers were empty. The repair teams were gone. The modifications and improvements were failing one by one as systems reverted to their original, less reliable configurations. Dextar tried calling the Human Technical Support Center, but the facility was abandoned. Security cameras showed empty corridors and darkened workstations. The humans had taken their knowledge with them, leaving behind only basic instruction manuals that didn't cover the complex reality of keeping the network operational. The communication breakdown was having effects far beyond just lost conversations. On the ice world of Frozen Deep, a mining colony was facing a life-threatening emergency. Their heating system had failed during a severe storm. The colonists needed immediate help, but they couldn't call for rescue ships or technical support. Colony Administrator Threshik walked through the cold corridors of the settlement, watching his breath form clouds in the freezing air. The heating failure would kill everyone in the colony within days if it couldn't be repaired. His maintenance team was working desperately to fix the problem, but they didn't have the right equipment or expertise. Under normal circumstances, this wouldn't have been a crisis. The colony would have called for help from the Galactic Emergency Network. Rescue ships would have been dispatched immediately. Technical experts would have provided remote guidance to help repair the heating system. Supply ships would have brought replacement parts and emergency equipment, but the communication network was down. The colony's distress calls were lost in the void. No one knew they were in danger. No help was coming. Threshik had tried sending messages using every communication method available to the colony: radio signals, laser communication, quantum transmitters. Nothing worked. The entire galactic communication infrastructure had collapsed, leaving his people isolated and dying. He remembered that the colony's communication system had been installed by a human company. The humans had done excellent work, setting up multiple backup systems and emergency protocols, but they had also been the ones maintaining and upgrading the system over the years. Without their constant attention, the advanced technology was failing. The irony was bitter. The humans had been expelled from the council for being too interfering and troublesome, but their interference had been keeping people alive. Their troublemaking had been solving problems before they became crises. On the agricultural world of green fields, the crop management system was collapsing. The planet fed 12 other worlds with its massive food production. Advanced computer systems controlled irrigation, fertilizer distribution, and pest management across millions of acres of farmland. The system required constant fine-tuning to maintain maximum efficiency. Farm manager Bloomhart watched helplessly as her computer screens showed red warnings across thousands of fields. The automated systems were malfunctioning, applying too much water in some areas and not enough in others. Fertilizer distribution was completely random. The pest control drones were spraying the wrong chemicals in the wrong places. The farm management system had been designed by a mixed team of species, but it had been maintained and improved by human technicians. They had learned to work with the different types of alien crops and had developed specialized solutions for the unique challenges of feeding a multi-species galaxy. The humans had also trained local workers on the basic operation of the system, but that training had focused on normal operations, not emergency repairs. When the system started failing, the local workers didn't know how to fix it. Bloomhart tried to call the Human Technical Support Center, but the communication network was down. Even if she could have reached them, the Human Support Center was probably empty anyway. The humans were all returning to Earth, taking their expertise with them. She stared out the window at the vast fields that stretched to the horizon. If the management system couldn't be repaired quickly, entire crops would be lost. Billions of beings across the galaxy would face food shortages. Some might even starve. Back on the council station, Chairman Veltar was dealing with a crisis that seemed to get worse every hour. Emergency reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. System failures, communication breakdowns, stranded ships, failing infrastructure. The problems were spreading faster than anyone could respond to. His aide Softwing brought him another stack of urgent messages. "Sir, we have 17 colonies reporting life support failures. 23 worlds have lost their communication links. The entire Outer Rim trade network has collapsed, and the medical emergency network is completely offline." Veltar's crystal form was glowing with stress patterns. "How many people are affected?" "Conservative estimates suggest over 1 billion beings are in immediate danger, sir. Food shortages, medical emergencies, communication blackouts, transportation failures. The number will be much higher if we can't restore basic services soon." The chairman stared at the reports with growing despair. Each problem seemed to trace back to the same root cause. Human technicians, engineers, and support staff had been quietly maintaining the infrastructure that kept galactic civilization running. When they left, everything started falling apart. "Can we contact Earth?" he asked quietly. "Perhaps we can. Negotiate some kind of emergency assistance." Softwing's feathers drooped with sadness. "We've been trying, sir, but Earth's communication systems are not responding to our calls. Either they're having technical problems of their own, or they're choosing not to answer." Veltar felt a cold fear settle in his crystal heart. The humans had been expelled as troublemakers. They had left quietly, without protests or threats. General Craxton of the mighty Korgan Empire had never known defeat. His warriors were the fiercest in the galaxy, his fleet was the most powerful, and his military intelligence network was the most sophisticated. For 30 years, he had kept the peace in his sector through strength and careful planning. Now he was staring at the worst military disaster in Korgan history. The rebellion on the mining world of Ferris 7 should have been crushed in days. A few thousand miners with improvised weapons against the full might of the Korgan military. It should have been simple, but nothing was working the way it was supposed to. His intelligence reports were completely wrong. The rebel positions his spies had identified were empty. The supply routes his agents had marked as secure were actually heavily defended. Worst of all, the rebels seemed to know exactly where his forces were going to attack before they even got there. "How is this possible?" General Craxton growled at his intelligence officer. "Our spy network has never failed this badly before." Major Velkash, a scarred veteran of dozens of campaigns, looked uncomfortable in his polished armor. "Sir, I've been reviewing our intelligence operations. It appears that most of our deep cover agents and information sources were actually coordinated through human intelligence services." The general's eyes blazed with fury. Humans? We don't work with humans. The Korgan Empire relies on its own strength. That's what we thought, sir. But I've been digging through the classified files. For years, human intelligence agencies have been providing us with information, technical support, and analysis. They helped us identify threats, track rebel movements, and predict enemy actions. They did it so quietly that most of our officers never realized we were working with them. General Craxton felt something he had never experienced before, the cold touch of helplessness. His entire military strategy was built on having superior intelligence about his enemies. Without reliable information, his powerful fleet was useless. His brave warriors were walking into traps. Can we contact the Human Intelligence Services directly? Major Velkash shook his head. We've tried, sir. All of their facilities have been abandoned. The humans pulled out completely when they left the council. They took all of their agents, their equipment, and their databases with them. On the peaceful world of harmony, the Dalari were facing their own catastrophe. Their entire civilization was built on careful balance and precise coordination. Every aspect of their society, from food distribution to population management, was planned and managed through complex computer systems. But those systems were failing. Elder Whispersong fluttered her delicate wings as she studied the disaster reports coming in from across the planet. The transportation network that moved goods between cities had collapsed. Food distribution centers were running out of supplies. Even the weather modification system that prevented natural disasters was malfunctioning. The Dalari had always prided themselves on their advanced technology and peaceful ways. They had looked down on the crude, violent humans as inferior beings. But now they were discovering a terrible truth. Much of their advanced technology had been designed, installed, and maintained by human engineers. Why were humans involved in our systems? Elder Whispersong asked her technical advisor. Swift thought, a young Dalari with bright blue feathers, consulted his datapad nervously. It appears that human companies won many of the contracts for building our infrastructure. They offered the lowest prices and the most reliable service. Our government chose them because they were cost-effective. But surely our own engineers understand how these systems work. Swift Thought's feathers drooped with embarrassment. Our engineers designed the basic frameworks, but the humans added thousands of modifications and improvements over the years. They solved problems we never even knew existed. Without their constant maintenance and updates, the systems are reverting to their original, less efficient configurations. Elder Whispersong felt a growing horror as she realized the scope of the problem. The Dalari had built their peaceful society on a foundation of human engineering and maintenance. Without the humans, their entire way of life was collapsing. The medical crisis was spreading across the galaxy like a plague. On New Eden, a frontier colony, Dr. Sarah Healing Touch was watching patients die from diseases that should have been easily treatable. Her medical supplies were running out, and she couldn't get replacements because the supply network had failed. But the real problem was more fundamental. Many of the treatments and procedures she relied on had been developed by human medical researchers. The humans had studied the diseases that affected multiple species and had created cures that worked across genetic barriers. They had been sharing this knowledge freely with doctors throughout the galaxy. Now that knowledge was leaving with the humans. Dr. Healing Touch had databases full of medical information, but much of it was incomplete without the context and experience that human doctors provided. The treatments that had saved thousands of lives were becoming useless without the humans who understood how to use them properly. She tried to contact the Human Medical Research Center on Arcturus Station, but the facility was empty. The researchers had taken their work with them when they returned to Earth. Years of medical advances were walking out the door. The economic collapse was accelerating. On the trading hub of Commerce Central, millions of beings who had made their living from interstellar trade were facing poverty and starvation. The complex web of trade relationships that connected hundreds of worlds was falling apart. Trade Master Profit Seeker, a member of the mercantile Ferengi-like species called the Goldhearts, watched his fortune disappear as trade routes collapsed. His warehouses were full of goods that couldn't be shipped to their destinations. His contracts were worthless because the transportation networks had failed. How did this happen? He wailed to his assistant. The trade networks were completely reliable. They had been working perfectly for decades. His assistant, unnervous, being named Smallcoin, showed him a datapad filled with shipping records. Sir, it appears that human companies were handling most of the logistics coordination. They managed the scheduling, the route planning, and the cargo transfers between different transportation systems. When they left, the entire network lost its central coordination. Profit Seeker stared at the records in disbelief. Human logistics companies had been invisible to him. He had dealt with alien shipping firms and transport guilds, never realizing that humans were working behind the scenes to make everything run smoothly. The humans had been the glue that held the galactic economy together. They had connected species that couldn't work directly with each other. They had solved the 1,000 small problems that could have shut down trade. They had been the mediators, the translators, and the problem solvers who made interstellar commerce possible. Now they were gone, and the galactic economy was collapsing. In the council chambers, Chairman Veltar was facing the worst crisis in galactic history. Representatives from dozens of worlds were demanding action. Some were angry, blaming the council for the disaster. Others were desperate, begging for help that the council couldn't provide. "We need to contact Earth immediately," declared Ambassador Rextar of the Korgan Empire. "My people are dying because our intelligence networks have failed. Only the humans can restore them." "My world is starving," cried Representative Bloombright of the agricultural planet Green Valley. "Our food distribution system has collapsed. We need human engineers to fix it." "Our medical networks are down," said Dr. Healmany from the hospital world of Mercy. "Patients are dying from treatable diseases because we can't access the human medical databases." Chairman Veltar listened to the desperate pleas with growing despair. Every representative had the same story. Critical systems were failing because humans had been maintaining them. People were dying because human expertise was no longer available. "We have tried to contact Earth," the chairman said quietly. "Their government is not responding to our communications." "Then send ships to Earth," demanded Ambassador Rextar. "We'll negotiate directly with them." "We cannot," Veltar admitted. "Our long-range navigation systems were maintained by human technicians. We don't have accurate star charts for reaching Earth. Most of our ships would get lost trying to find D." The chamber fell silent as the representatives absorbed this news. They had expelled the humans as troublemakers, but now they couldn't even find them to apologize. "What about the human colonies in our territory?" asked Dr. Healmany. Surely some humans remained behind. Softwing, the chairman's aide, fluttered forward with more bad news. "Sir, we've checked all the former human settlements in council territory. They're empty. Every human facility has been abandoned. They appear to have evacuated their entire population." The representatives stared at each other in shock. The humans hadn't just left the council. They had disappeared completely from galactic space. It was as if they had never existed, except for the massive holes they had left behind in galactic civilization. Chairman Veltar felt the weight of his mistake settling on him like a mountain. He had thought he was removing a troublesome species from the council. Instead, he had destroyed the foundation that held everything together. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in the organization's history. The Great Chamber, which had once echoed with dignified debate and careful diplomacy, now rang with desperate voices and barely controlled panic. "Chairman," Veltar stood before the assembled representatives, his crystal form flickering with stress patterns that would have been embarrassing under normal circumstances. But these were not normal circumstances. The galaxy was dying and everyone knew it. "The situation continues to deteriorate," he announced to the hushed chamber. "We now have confirmed reports of complete infrastructure collapse in 47 systems. Casualty estimates have reached 12 million and are climbing rapidly." A wave of horrified murmurs swept through the chamber. Representative Sorrowdeep of the Delari spoke first, her musical voice cracking with emotion. "My homeworld has lost 30% of its population. Our food distribution network failed completely. Children are starving in the streets while warehouses full of grain sit empty because we don't know how to operate the transport systems." The Korgan Outer Rim territories have been overrun by pirates and rebels, growled General Craxton. Without our intelligence networks, we couldn't predict or prevent any of their attacks. 3 entire colonies have been destroyed. Dr. Heal-Many from the medical world of Mercy stood shakily. We've lost contact with 18 medical research stations. Diseases that were eradicated decades ago are returning because we can't manufacture or distribute the treatments. The plague on Rigel 7 has killed 2 million beings so far. Each report was worse than the last. The careful civilization that the Council had built over centuries was collapsing like a house of cards. Without the humans to maintain the connections between systems, everything was falling apart. We must contact Earth, Chairman Veltar declared. Whatever it takes. We need their help, and we need it immediately. His aide, Softwing, approached the podium with a data pad. Her feathers were drooping with exhaustion and fear. Sir, we've been trying to reach Earth for 2 weeks. We've sent messages on every available communication channel. Long-range radio, quantum transmitters, even old-fashioned laser signals. Nothing gets through. Are their communication systems damaged? Asked Ambassador Rextar. We don't think so, sir. Our scout ships report that Earth's orbital stations are still active, but they're not responding to any of our signals. It appears that they're deliberately ignoring us. A cold silence fell over the chamber. The representatives had never considered that the humans might simply refuse to help. After all, humans had always been eager to interfere in other people's problems. Surely they would come running to fix the crisis they had left behind. Send a fleet to Earth, demanded General Craxton. We'll negotiate in person. Softwing's feathers ruffled with nervousness. Sir, we tried that. Admiral Stormwind took a diplomatic fleet toward Earth 3 days ago, but they never arrived. What happened to them? The general growled. They got lost, sir. Our long-range navigation systems were calibrated and maintained by human technicians. Without them, our ships can't navigate accurately over interstellar distances. Admiral Stormwind's fleet is currently stranded somewhere in the Outer Rim, trying to find their way home. The admission sent a shock through the chamber. The mighty fleets of the Council couldn't even find Earth. The humans had been responsible for more systems than anyone had realized. Chairman Veltar felt his crystal structure beginning to crack under the stress. What about human colonies within our territory? Surely we can find some humans who stayed behind. That's the strangest part, sir, Softwing said quietly. We've investigated every human settlement, research station, and outpost in Council. Space. They're all empty. Not abandoned hastily, but evacuated completely and systematically. The humans appear to have been planning this departure for some time. Representative Flashfire of the energy-based Zephyrians flickered with confusion. How is that possible? We gave them only 72 hours to leave Council territory. The evacuation was too thorough to have been planned in 3 days, Softwing explained. Our investigators believe the humans began evacuating their non-essential personnel weeks or even months ago. They must have seen the vote coming and prepared for it. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans hadn't been surprised by their expulsion. They had been expecting it. While the Council had been debating whether to remove them, the humans had been quietly preparing to leave. What did they leave behind? Asked Dr. Heal-Many desperately. Softwing consulted her datapad. Very little of value, sir. They cleared out all their research databases, technical manuals, and equipment. They left only basic instruction guides for the systems they had been maintaining. But those guides assume a level of technical knowledge that most of our people don't possess. Chairman Veltar stared out the great window of the Council chamber at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there was Earth, with its 4 billion humans who could solve all of these problems. But they might as well have been on the other side of the universe. Did they leave any messages? He asked quietly. Any explanations or demands? Only one, sir. Softwing called up a text display that appeared in the air above the chamber. The message was short and simple. To the Galactic Council. We understand that our presence was no longer welcome. We have removed all human personnel and equipment from Council territory as requested. We wish you well in your future endeavors. Earth Government. The formal politeness of the message was somehow more devastating than any angry threat would have been. The humans had accepted their rejection calmly and completely. They had taken their skills and knowledge and left the galaxy to manage without them. There must be something we can offer them, pleaded Representative Profit Seeker, whose world was facing economic collapse. Trade agreements, territory, membership in the council with full voting rights, anything they want. Chairman Veltar turned away from the window. What could we possibly offer them that they would want? We expelled them as troublemakers. We told them they were too violent and unpredictable to be part of galactic civilization. Why would they want to come back and help us now? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. The council had insulted and rejected the humans. They had driven away the very people who had been keeping everyone alive. And now those people were gone, with no reason to return and every reason to stay away. Reports continued to flood in throughout the emergency session. Entire star systems going dark as power grids failed. Colonies dying as life support systems broke down. Fleets stranded in space as navigation computers malfunctioned. Medical research stations shutting down as equipment failed without proper maintenance. The galaxy was experiencing a technological collapse unlike anything in recorded history. Advanced civilizations were reverting to primitive conditions as their complex systems failed one by one. Billions of beings were suffering and dying because the people who understood how to fix things were no longer available. On the Korgan homeworld, General Craxton was dealing with revolution. Without intelligence, networks to predict trouble, rebel groups had seized control of several major cities. The general's forces were powerful but blind, unable to coordinate their responses effectively. On the Dalari world of harmony, Elder Whispersong was watching her peaceful civilization tear itself apart. Without the transportation networks to distribute resources fairly, different regions were hoarding supplies and fighting over what remained. The careful balance that had defined Dalari society for centuries was collapsing into chaos. On the medical world of mercy, Dr. Heal-Many was making impossible choices about who would live and who would die. Without human medical knowledge and supply networks, she could only save a fraction of her patients. The rest would die from diseases that should have been easily treatable. 3 weeks after the humans left, Chairman Veltar received the report he had been dreading. A survey ship had finally managed to reach the Sol system and observe Earth from a safe distance. The report was brief and devastating. Earth appears to be completely abandoned. No activity detected in major population centers. Orbital stations are running on automatic systems only. No response to communication attempts. It is as if the entire human species has vanished. Veltar read the report 3 times before its meaning fully sank in. The humans hadn't just left Council territory. They had left Earth itself. 4 billion people had disappeared without a trace, taking their knowledge and skills to some unknown destination. The search for the humans became desperate. Scout ships were sent to every system that had ever had human presence. Ancient human colony worlds were investigated. Even the restricted zones and quarantined systems were searched. But the humans were nowhere to be found. It was as if they had never existed, except for the massive holes they had left in galactic civilization. Some ships reported strange sightings in deep space. Unidentified vessels moving at impossible speeds, disappearing before they could be investigated. Energy signatures that didn't match any known technology. But these reports were dismissed as sensor malfunctions or wishful thinking. The truth was simpler and more final. The humans were gone. They had taken their 4 billion people, their technology, their knowledge,